Greetings, everyone. My name is Adam Hems. Are there any newbies here today? There's a lot of familiar faces.
David, raise your hand.
One.
There we go.
David's new.
Welcome, David.
Yeah, welcome.
Welcome, David.
Yeah. So just for David then, I'll give you the quick spiel because everyone else has heard it. Actually, there might be some new people online, so it's all good. So what we're about, my name is Adam Hems. My day job, along with my co-leader, Kim Vaddi, right here. We do it together. Our day jobs involve Azure all day long and talking to customers all day long about cloud and all those kinds of things. And it's fun and we like that. But what we don't get an opportunity to do is for the customers to learn from each other, right? Which is, they're all in the same company and there's NDAs and things like that. Learn from each other and also be more of a community. So this is a community. So learn from each other as well as the speakers. That's why we have it in the evenings, because it's not a sales pitch. If you're here for a sales pitch, David, you're in the wrong place. You need to leave because you're not going to get one. It's not happening. So come back maybe during the day, but that's not what we are about. We don't do that. And so we do things that we invite recruiters to come. They've come and also to post on the board because job hunting is also part of it, helping each other. People who want to get into the field or people who want to change roles or things like that, then that's also part of it. That's also why we're here. So we invite everyone. We get everyone from students to U of H come here a lot, to very experienced people, most of which that will be everyone else here, actually. What do you do, David? Tell us about yourself.
0 years of experience.
Excellent. Brand new.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, you are very much in the right place. Yeah. You have a lot of experienced people here. Developers, architects, people at big companies, oil and gas companies, healthcare companies, and online to learn from. All things Azure. So yeah, don't hesitate to chat to people. That's what we're about. That's why we also have it in person, right? Because there's a million YouTube channels and there's millions of those. We can all do that. But while we're all here in person, it's because then we can get to chit chat and yak. All right. Tony and I were having a good chin wag earlier about how great it was to have a good old chin wag. We like that. So that's also why we're here as well. We try and meet once a month. We've usually managed it. Second Tuesday of each month, usually. And food tonight is sponsored by Microsoft, once again, who also let us use the room, which is nice of them. It does vary. We are looking for speakers. So if anyone feels like there's a topic around Azure experience you want to talk about, things you've done, things you've learned, and of anything vaguely Azure related, let Kim or I know, because I think that would be interesting to everyone. The best talks are actually the ones by members of the community. They're always the best. They're always the most interesting. So we'd love to hear you from those. All right. With that, I'm going to hand over to you, Kim. Do you want to just bellow or use?
Yeah. Hey James, are you online? I want to make sure that you're.
I'm here.
There we go. We can hear him. Excellent.
I wanted to introduce James. I think.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. James, my co-presenter, he's
You have to point it.
yeah. James is a specialist, infra specialist. An honor to have him co-present with me in the AVS space here. So James, would you like to introduce yourself, a few words with the audience?
Sure can. So hey everyone, James Moorman. I'm based here in Austin, Texas. I am an Azure infrastructure specialist, but prior to joining Microsoft, I came from VMware. Spent a combined 7 years pre and post acquisition. My most recent role over there was the Azure VMware Solution Specialist. So I covered about 20 states east of the Mississippi, and that's all I talked about all day, every day was AVS. So happy to be here and support the group.
Thanks, James. Appreciate it.
Hey neighbor, just up the road.
Yes.
Yeah. We've had people driving in from Austin.
In Texas terms, is Austin to Houston, that's a hop, skip, and a jump, right?
Next door. It's next door. Dallas is just up the road. Austin is next door. So it's all good. So howdy neighbor. They've been practicing. I'm from England originally. I've been practicing. What do you think? All right, good. Okay. Sorry, bossing around.
No, it's good. So I wanted to start with asking the audience, are any of you guys here an avid athlete?
Are we what?
Avid athlete.
Athletes. And I wish.
What if we were?
It's okay, man. I don't want to put you on the spot, but
No.
A leader, I mean, whether it's leader in a fitness, leader in your community, doesn't really matter. The point I'm trying to drive here is that consistency to show up to achieve the goal is keys in life. I mean, in the world where we have 5 billion people overweight and 2 billion people are not exercising, and 1% of us that actually are consistent, show up day after day, grit, and achieve those goals. So the fact you guys are here to learn and share with the community, you are that top 1%. So be that top 1% and spread the joy of being consistency in terms of achieving goals in life. That's wanted to share that. But in terms of today's agenda, James and I is going to be covered in terms of AVS. A quick intro, we did that. We're gonna quickly go over some of the use cases, the architecture, the building blocks of AVS, and then there will be demos in the portal. And I haven't logged in yet, so bear with me for that. Then we will talk about networking storage, a little bit of discussion about Gen 1, Gen 2 of AVS. What that means, Gen 2, by the way, it's not in GA yet, it's in preview.
Public preview?
Public preview, yes, but it's not GA yet. And then we're going to be looking into the portal a little bit about the H8CX, which is the migrating tool AVS. And then we have some time, we peek into the portal in terms of pricing, and James will walk you through that. But so does anybody of Vaddi actually work with AVS? Their day jobs?
Is it the car rental? No, just.
So what is VMware, by the way? Just forget about AVS, So does anybody work with VMware on-prem?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. All right. So on-prem, so it's kind of wanted to go back a little bit about what is a VMware environment and what did hyperconverge mean? Does anybody want to take a good guess? I mean, like a shot at what is hyperconverge mean to you guys?
Is it an hypervisor?
Okay, so hyperconverge is actually meant that CPU, RAM, and storage all packed together in one little package that you can work it to spin up different virtual machine, right? So natively, that's what it meant. So Microsoft and VMware actually worked together to build a comprehensive solution run on a dedicated infrastructure in Azure. And we're going to go into the detail of why and how it looked like in Azure. What's different between running VMware on-prem versus running VMware in Azure, and some of the networking component and some of the use case here. So basically, AVS or Azure VMware is a software-defined data center. So historically, data center is on-prem. So what you as a company, I'm just going to pick an example, a customer. I'm going to pick IBM. I own my data center. I have VMware running in my data center, and you got your host, ESXi host, which is the hypervisor deeply embedded that run on the physical hardware, right? So you own, you maintain, you run electricity, you upgrade, and all of that capital expenditure that you invest in that is on you, right? And there's time for maintenance as well as upgrade when your hardware actually go old, and you need to upgrade for a better and faster solution. All that burden is on you. Whereas in AVS, all of that burden, you shift that responsibility to Microsoft. And Microsoft have dedicated team as well as support personnel to help you with that, and it's scalable. James will probably chime in some of these in terms of the benefit later on to move to VMware, and so the software-defined center actually came with or equipped with the VMware Cloud Foundation in terms of vSphere, vCenter, are you familiar with vCenter, which is a tool that manage the vMotions, vSAN you add and spin up and spin down machine. And then the other one is the network piece, NSXT, which is a virtualization network with security as well. So if you want to segment your network, and NSXT is the one you actually wanted to be able to work with, and you can go to and what it looks like. So basically your VMware workload is run natively in Azure, and all the Azure services is right next to it. So if you want to have a modernizations and fast equipped with the latest and the greatest in Azure, VMware is the way to go. Does anybody have a questions? Yeah.
What's involved in migrating your VMware from your on-prem equipment into Azure?
Yeah, actually, a couple slides. You jump ahead, right? Appreciate the questions. We have the migration process that we'll share with you in a later slide. But what we're looking at here is essentially the stats to your left, which is representing the on-premises data center, right? And here we are seeing the ESXi host, which is the hypervisor. And then you see the vCenter, vSAN, and VM running natively, right? But to your right, that is your private cloud in Azure. It's dedicated data center, dedicated hardware stack that hosts the private cloud, called the Azure VMware Solution. And furthermore, next to it, your neighbor, Azure Services, Entra ID, authentication, and integration with LDAP is there for you to be able to communicate and connect to Azure, right? And there are many other Azure services that in the blue box to the right that can help you to innovate, modernize, monitor, and securely run your business in Azure. Because you can see here, the connectivity here between the on-prem as well as to Azure is done by ExpressRoute, VPN, or you can probably use the internet as well. So that's in a nutshell what it looked like in terms of the visual. And with this particular, I wanted to share this architecture diagram, a very simple one, which is another representation of the previous, but it's much more simpler in terms of the VMware solution. So the key takeaway here is the adjacency of private cloud and VNet in Azure. Is anyone familiar with VNet concept?
No.
Okay. So VNet is a virtual network in Azure that hosts a block of CIDR, and that's where you deploy it, or you can. It's like a container to perimeterize your Azure services. You can put security around it in terms of NSG, ASG. You can deploy different subnet within the VNet to be able to segment your workload. So in a nutshell, that's what a VNet is. So here you can see that in VMware in Azure is not anything different from on-prem, right? So you have your hypervisor, you got your vSphere, vSAN. Does anybody know what a vSAN is? Maybe tell me.
The storage solution?
I'm sorry?
Is it a storage solution?
Yes, thank you. That's perfect. So essentially when you deploy VMware, the host that is running underneath, and I think James, was it AV36 is a minimum three node cluster, right?
Yeah, it's the AV36P.
Thank you. So that's a minimum as a seed So when you deploy those nodes, underneath they are storage, and each of the server have their own storage. So what a vSAN is, essentially is a software layer that pull all of those disks together and present as a one big pot, so that the vSphere can carve out a segment or piece of the storage to be able to store your VHDK image when you spin up and spin down machine, or you can vMotion it into different zone of storage. So, and here is one of the key thing in this solution architecture is that should be able to connect to on-prem to Azure across multiple region or data center. Global reach express route is highly encouraged to enable by default. It should come with it because there's no transitive concept of network connectivity if you don't enable global reach. For instance, I'm my data center here in Houston, and I have my private cloud here in the US, East and West. I cannot connect to Azure without global reach. To talk to my private cloud in US West and East. The global reach is the default that highly recommended. Connect your on-premises to VMware private cloud. We're going through that, and then some of the use case here, the on-premises VMware offer a sense of a lot of control and familiarity in terms of the tool, but it's not, it doesn't come without a drawback. So what had happened is that many different companies are moving their VMware workload into Azure, and these are the reasons. Application modernization. So previously, you see on the diagram a couple of Azure services that actually sitting right next to private cloud, right? It's in the same data center. It's just separate by dedicated hardware, but having proximity to native Azure services, enabling you to quickly and robustly modernize your application. And here is another reason is infrastructure refresh, right? So earlier I mentioned about the need to refresh hardware. And while you do that, or you max out capacity on-prem, what are you going to do? How are you going to burst? How are you going to quickly burst? AVS. The quickest way to burst and expand without having to buy hardware and maintains it. Correct me if I'm wrong, James.
No, that's spot on. So a lot of our use cases for customers were for ancillary data centers where maybe it was less static and a little bit more dynamic of a load. So instead of going through a large hardware purchase and then trying to depreciate those assets over 5 years and then figure out, okay, how do we maximize the ROI on that investment? Right? Stop me when that all sounds familiar. Customers would extend their data center from on-prem into AVS, and that became their burstable VMware data center.
Thanks, James. Appreciate that. And same thing with, virtual desktop, right? So bursting that capability into Azure is another reason, the use case, and DR to complementing your existing infrastructure from recovering from a disaster happen. So these are some of the use case that we've seen in the field. So the key takeaway here is that if you look to your left and right, it pretty much is a symmetry, right? So the VMware solution is actually built on the foundation of symmetry. So you have access to your private cloud through the express route or VPN, right? And it is powered by the dedicated bare metal infrastructures with your complete vSphere cluster. And vSphere is a proprietary VMware technology that run on top of those physical hardware, right? And it's allow you to really deploy and migrate smoothly into AVS with the migration like HCX. And I can show you in the portal in a little bit what it looked like. And we're going to have to go to ACX Manager to be able to set up some of the configuration. I don't have my own data center, so I could not do a live migration, but there's some video we can quickly gaze through that. But that's wanted to share the slide with you guys. So basically, the connectivity is to your existing infrastructure is to Azure is effortlessly possible by Express Cloud global reach I mentioned earlier. So it's essentially what is happening is it's bridging your on-premise environment to your AVS private cloud. I think it's a repeat. Yeah, yes, sir.
So when we do this, what happens to the portal azure.com? So all of those, like if we have to access our own VM, it would have to be good. I mean, we have to go through Azure portal to allocate or create any VMs and all those. Is it?
No, not necessarily. So essentially, when you set up VMware in the portal, you can do through script as well. But when you set it in the portal, there is a jump box that allow you to get to VMware environment. You gotta have to go to the jump box, and then in the jump box is essentially connected safely. It's called Bastion host, by the way. That connected your VMware environment securely, and you deploy a portal called the vCenter, NCX, HCX Manager, and I can show you the credential, how to get to it, and we can do a live exercise, how to connect to it and what it look like.
So it would look like Azure portal, but the different.
No, it's actually a web interface.
Huh?
It's a web.
Oh,
Web interface in your Bastion host.
Oh, I see.
So all of this is done through a browser.
Yeah.
So you don't have to go to the portal. The only thing that you go to the portal is to deploy your Bastion host. Once you're in the Bastion host, you deploy the vCenter with a admin local credential that you acquire during the deployment. And normally the deployment took about 4.5 to 5 hours. I'm not doing that tonight. I have pre-built lab that can be tapped into. A great question, by the way. So basically the whole idea here is I think we cover this in terms of because Azure VMware is run in Azure infrastructure, so you can enjoy the scalability, the security, and the global reach capability that comes with it. So, and it integrates seamlessly with Azure ecosystem, so you can innovate and drive go-to-market quicker, faster, and you free up your staff from doing mundane tasks to spend time on strategic initiative your company. I don't know about you guys, but I used to do stack and rack in Azure not Azure, but in data center. And honestly, I don't like what I'm doing because I have to hot swap disk. If I know that disk go bad when it's turned amber, and it depends whether I have a pair or just a single disk. So if I accidentally pull a single disk, and I'm really in trouble. The whole application is down. So all this thing is offshore to, it's fully managed. So I'm saving myself on the headaches, structures, maintenance there.
Okay, question from Amanda.
Yes, sir.
Amanda asks if we don't have VMware on premises, what are the advantages of using AVS instead of native Azure IaaS?
What do you think, James?
The way that I usually present AVS is it's a vehicle to get to our driveway, meaning Azure. So if you're not built on VMware on-prem, AVS is probably not the right solution for you to drive to our party. Usually that's going to be Azure IaaS.
Well, thank you.
So this is for those teams already have VMware and they want to quickly get into Azure, is this the easiest way?
Yep.
Like they move all those VMs one by one, or if they don't want to move, they can keep, but you will get a feeling of Azure when all of those things are built, basically. Like even you can have Azure SQL, but SQL VM is in your on-prem VMware somewhere, which is that how things are going to be with, like, for example, if you're deploying a SQL server.
Was there a question in there?
Yes, I was asking if.
This is
let's
just like
assume-
hosting your VMware at Azure. I don't want to say just, I mean, there's a lot to be had by doing that. But if you're running your own SQL today
Correct.
in VMware, then
It doesn't provide all those, yeah,
Beauty.
yes, like a backup and all those, like disaster recovery and all those, but.
it would still be
you
much
want to-
cooler for you to go to Azure SQL services, but the low friction, fast answer to get some of the benefits is to use AVS to move it over.
So there are
That's
two
right, yeah.
components to your scenario. One is at a VM level, and this is an infrastructure level overall.
Right, yeah.
So SQL Server database run on the VM. And
You will have it on your on-prem, but you want to,
if you want to move it, just the SQL database or the
on
whole?
anything.
Okay, so you can move the whole VM from on-prem, remotion it to Azure seamlessly, and you can move it back as well. If, let's say, things go wrong,
Yeah.
I want to go back. Yes, you can move it using the HCX migration tool. There are many method of replicate, hot transfer or live app replication where I've seen vMotion that have probably a split second of connectivity issue when you vMotion into a different environment in Azure. So it's very, very non-disruptive, what's what I meant to say.
Does Azure SQL have a migration tool built into it?
Well, if you ask me right now, Azure Arc is your tool to go to. It's a migrate SQL database as well. It came out in February this year. Arc has new capabilities. So if I were you and your software benefit already included, if I were you, activate it, roll it out, that you're saving a lot of headaches in terms of database migration, assessment, patching, and you get reaping the benefit of patching capabilities as well as inventory management. Sorry, this is side conversation, this is AVS, but I mean, AVS is also depending on Arc, Azure Arc as well. I'll tell you why. But, you know, in this particular slide, quick takeaway, I don't want to take 2 minutes much time, but with AVS, you essentially capitalize on your existing VMware environment, investment, right? And the skill set and tool that you're familiar with. You don't have to learn anything new, right? You pick it up, same thing, flip and shift to whether your data center in Azure, the same interface, look and feel the same. The benefit and the scalability and the performance, you are leveraging that at scale in Azure with Microsoft. Leave it to Microsoft. They know the cloud business. And when you in Azure, you can quickly modernize your workload, rationalize your application and modernize it very quickly and effortlessly, especially taking the benefit of AI Foundry and many other AI model in Azure. And the closer to the Azure, the more less latency, I mean, robust application and user experience it's awesome. So that's basically, this is what this slide is about. I wanted to share that with you guys. And then these are some of the benefit in terms of the features. When you in Azure, you leverage Arc for the governance, using policy. There's an ecosystem of different partners that can leverage and to use with your existing VMware tool and knowledge. So that's what this slide is about. I don't want to read that to you. James, I think your section is coming up.
So another question. So under the hood, what happens? Like, let's say you have VMware, bunch of like whole of your data center. You want to integrate that with Azure. Let's say something fails, some hardware fails. Is that once you integrated, is that like something that you would know that hardware is failed through Azure's its own way of communicating to the team or?
Okay, so I'm hearing a couple of things. You say integration with what?
With Azure, like
Your application integrate with Azure? Is that what you mean?
not the applications, but like whole of that.
Hardware nodes? Is that what you
Yes, the hardware.
So if you're asking what happens if
Something fails,
an
like-
AVS hardware node fails?
Correct. Like, for example, in Azure, when you deploy anything on Azure, all of the hardware failure, everything is taken care of by
Correct.
Microsoft. So the responsibility is yours.
Correct.
In this case, whose responsibility is that? Something goes bad, like you have to have these companies involved in those.
So in the dedicated infrastructure in Azure, we have a team behind the scene that actually do maintenance, regular checkup. And there's Azure Service Health Alert you can set up yourself to send a notification to let you know that, hey, Microsoft is doing maintenance on this particular server, this time zone, and I need to vMotion my VM to a different host that are not affected. So you get to know ahead of time.
Yeah.
And then mitigate the risk. And if there really a disaster happen, you should have a DR solution in place. If you don't, do you have a backup?
Yeah, I'm betting that Microsoft would have all those under the hood, everything. Something goes bad, they know
Absolutely.
details of it. You provide all those information to the VMware team in the local
Yes, all of that support.
services data center.
Correct. There is a dedicated team that are responsible, and Microsoft handle all of that.
Yeah, and to elaborate on that real quick, if I can. So all of the AVS components are built with HA baked in. So smaller deployments, I believe like 5 and less nodes are N+1. I think anything above 5 nodes is automatically N+2. And the whole point of AVS, when we were co-engineering this with VMware 5 years ago, one of the stipulations was like, hey guys, we can't engineer this to be like cloud native where HA isn't always baked in, right? You have to kind of design that and build it out, different availability zones. VMware customers come to VMware on-prem because, I mean, the least glamorous thing you could say about VMware is it just works, right? That was my joke always when I was at VMware. It just works. It works great. And so they're going to expect that with the VMware name when they bring it to Azure. So when we build this out, no matter how many nodes you have to fit your VMs in, there's always going to be several ghost nodes behind the scene that are running for HA purposes. So if you have a node failure or a disk failure or CPU fries, whatever the case may be, you're none the wiser. Like, you'll get a notification, hey, this is what happened, something happened, but as long as it's not going to be more than those 2 hosts that you have N+2 behind the scenes that requires some sort of like a disaster recovery scenario, the HA is just going to hum along just like it would on-prem. So you shouldn't see any disruption in those services. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm trying to-
And then from a support perspective, everything goes through Microsoft. So this is a Microsoft first-party service. We're the one hand to shake. Anything goes wrong in your AVS environment, it's Azure, right? From a Microsoft perspective, it's an Azure service. So support goes through Azure, including the VMware licensing, right? So if you have a problem with some VMware issues on top of your, AVS stack, because this is, fully integrated, it's hyper-converged, you just open up a ticket. And if it requires VMware engineering, we have that back channel. So that's our handshake agreement we have with Broadcom to ensure that we have support for AVS, because we're one of the, if not the largest procurer of VMware licensing on the planet. right? We have that backdoor with them. So again, Microsoft becomes your one hand to shake for support, and then we would raise whatever tickets we need to on the back end with VMware Broadcom support.
Gotcha.
Does the fact that VMware can run multiple operating systems have any effect when you move it to the cloud?
If it runs on VMware on-prem today, it runs in AVS. So if you got some legacy OSs, I've seen, I think the oldest OS I've seen in an RV Tools export was Windows NT, believe it or not. So as long as it's running in your VMware environment on-prem, it will run in AVS.
So in other words, Microsoft takes care of whole of the software stack basically. And companies just would have to be only working on the hardware, providing hardware, I mean, on the VMware, whatever the data center hardwares are. Like that's what it is, like how.
No, you don't provide hardware either. So Microsoft provides everything.
Okay, gotcha.
So the only thing that our customers have to manage, and I believe we have a slide that kind of talks through it, but there's basically anything below the OS level is completely off your plate.
Oh, I see. Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you for answering that question.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah. So just further elaboration. So I think we had some questions and comments earlier about how is this managed? It's kind of managed in two different ways. From a macro level, it's going to be managed through the Azure portal, as you can see here, right? So you can log into your Azure portal, see your overview. You'll see your SDDC, what region it's in. You can add hosts. This is where you'll add hosts for an AVS cluster or spin up a new AVS cluster, manage any Entra ID, right? So if you want to do RBAC controls on all of your AVS stuff, all the Azure native services and host level services are provided through the Azure portal. From a micro standpoint, right, I need to manage my VMs, let's say, or I need to manage my NSXT. Maybe I want to start looking at microsegmentation from a security and a hardening standpoint. That's going to be done through your vSphere web client, right? So like Kim mentioned, they're both going to be managed through a web client. This is going to be your macro view here with your Azure portal, and then again, this is where you would manage all of your any add-on services from Azure that you want to add on. Okay, next slide. So this is the slide I was talking about, what you manage, right? On the left is what you'd manage typically in an on-prem data center. On the right is what you manage in AVS. So obviously any additional monitoring or management tools that you want to bring along, your applications themselves, clearly, your operating system, all of those things are what you manage. Everything else gets jettisoned to Microsoft. That includes the VMware licensing, that includes any updates, patching, and security for your VMware licensing, right? So gone are the days where you have to go through and update your vSphere from 7.5 to 8.0, right? We take care of all of that for you. And if there's ever a major update or a security or a patch that requires downtime, that's something that we would work with our customers on, just like any other hyperscaler or any other kind of like OS. Well, this is our peak time. You can't take our systems down between 9 and 5. We'll have to work with you either on a weekend or a night. That's totally fine, right? But the main takeaway from this slide is no longer do you have to babysit the plumbing or any of the infrastructure underneath. Really free up your time to do more important things like managing your applications, or even start to modernize, right? So a lot of our customers actually use AVS, sure, as a way to get out of the data center with less risk and greater speed. But now a lot of times what they're doing is they're using that as a springboard towards things like those Azure SQL databases you were talking about. Well, maybe I want to modernize that. Maybe I want to start messing around with infrastructure as code or Azure Kubernetes. Great, you can do that. AVS does not have to be your ideal end state. In fact, we have a lot of customers that don't. They just say, look, in order to accelerate our modernization efforts, it's going to be a lot better if we can just get out of the data center, get out of being bogged down from all of the infrastructure that we have to manage. Let's go ahead and forklift this over with AVS. Because of the tools that come involved, we don't even have to re-IP our workloads, let alone, refactor anything. And now that it's in Azure, it's, sub 2 milliseconds away from all of the great Azure native services. So takeaway here, you get more time to do more important things and not babysit your infrastructure. Next slide. So popping open the hood, this is our node types, right? So all the server admins in the room get to ooh and ah on the specs and kind of, what do we get here? If I had a laser pointer, I'd point it at the screen and say everything left of, the AV64s are what I would consider legacy. It doesn't mean bad. In fact, the AV36P is still kind of like our flagship hallmark legacy node that we use for our customers. It's just a good bang for buck node type. But the AV64s represent our newest in the future of AVS, which is our fleet hardware, which we can do obviously at a much lower clip than having to do the Dell VX rails like the 36P, the 48, and the 52 are on. Suffice it to say, if you were to build out an AVS cluster today, you would need at least a 3-node cluster, seed cluster. You can see there at the very, very bottom left, the text there, right? Minimum 3 nodes per cluster. Again, you get a 4th one as a ghost host for HA. You don't get exposed to it, but it's there. But you need at least those 3 nodes. To give you a ballpark, okay, what does 3 nodes mean? What can we fit on there? You can see here the storage, compute, memory. Usually our customers fit about 75 VMs, give or take, right? Just depends on how large your VMs are. That's usually what you can fit on a 3-node cluster. But because of the scalability of vSAN and the benefits of scalability overall with hyper-converged infrastructure, typically you'll see your return on investment increase as the hosts and the node counts increase. I always say like the most expensive per VM cost is a 3-node cluster. As you start to scale that out, you'll see your costs actually start to go down simply because, again, this is hyper-converged, so it's a giant pool of resources, and then your VMs kind of get tossed in there just like you would on-prem. So obviously, the larger the pool we can play with, the more VMs, the better density we can fit. And you'll see there AV64 Gen 1, Gen 2. What does that mean, James? All that means is you could see there at the bottom, there's, this Dell hardware, and then AV64 Gen 1 says initial 3-node cluster. That's because these VX rails are hyper-converged, and it comes with the management console and all of like the VMware licensing for that management cluster is pre-installed. And so Gen 2 represents the fact that we have those pre-installed on our fleet hardware, right? So for now, AV64s, again, those represent the future of AVS. You would need an initial 3-node Dell cluster, whether it's the 36Ps, the 48s, or the 52s, and then you scale up, whatever node from there that you'd like. That's a lot of words. You can see the maximums down there at the bottom as well, right? 96 nodes per private cloud instance. That is a massive, massive environment. If you're running more than 5,000 to 7,000 VMs in an AVS environment, which some of our customers do, fine. You just boot up multiple different private clouds and you link them together just like you would, multiple different data centers on-prem.
Question? Could you talk about Azure Virtual Network for the AV64 Gen 2 nodes I see there?
Yes. So you can see here all on the left, everything with the Dell hardware requires ExpressRoute to connect in. I am not, I'll just full disclaimer, I'm not a networking expert. I can get down to about a 100 level, but I do not want to misrepresent. I would simply say if you have additional networking questions, Kim and I can point you in the right direction and we can get some folks to talk to you. It's really, really deep on the networking side. But suffice it to say, with the next gen architecture, because it's again fleet hardware and because of the way that it's architected from a software and a hardware perspective, we don't require the express route. It actually hooks directly into the Azure backbone, right? So that's where that Azure virtual network comes into play.
Yeah, I can
That-
add, sorry. Jim.
Okay, please do.
Yeah, I can add some flavor to the questions that came up. So the difference here is that in Gen 2, like James mentioned, it is not required to have an express route. Previously, you have to have 2 express route, right? So now the AVS deployed directly in Azure. It is not a dedicated, it's not a private cloud anymore. So essentially, you can do your AVS VNet peering to a non-AVS VNet. But in Gen 2, Gen 1, that wasn't the case. You have to have an express route, a dedicated express route for AVS. And in Gen 2, it gets even better. You can leverage NSG, ASG to segment your traffic in directly in Azure, directly hooked to Azure. It is now associated and part of Azure. So that's the difference. And I do want to call out that in Gen 2, it is native Azure deployment, right? So you're using AV64 node and it is really fully integrated into Azure infrastructure. Because of that, you have, there's no need for extra configuration in comparison to Gen 1. And then, in terms of express configuration in Gen 1, you have to enable a global reach with the manual configuration, but in Gen 2, it is directly integrated with Azure Route Server. Is anybody familiar with Route Server? It is nothing but a reflector. It's a reflector of routing. And then it's also integrated with V1. And it simplifies your BGP peering to be able to efficiently and quickly route traffic. So it's to make your life simpler in networking perspective. Does it help?
So what happens to existing VMs in the private data center, on-prem data center? Like if like our company, for example, has a lot of data center. We are not moving those data center to Azure yet. I mean, we haven't. We have Azure different subscription itself. We do various things on Azure. But in case if we have to, let's say, move this data center to under Azure as AVS, what happens to existing VMs, for example, already hosted, doing something, and
Sorry, could you clarify the existing VM? Where is it?
in the VMware
And it's on-prem.
on-prem, yeah.
So if you move, it's
Oh, sorry.
yeah.
Go ahead.
If you move, you move. It's
Move those
basically
two as well.
basically you moving houses, right? You
Yeah, I see.
from an old house to a new house.
Yeah, I see. So those existing machines will be moved over into Azure at that point.
So it's going to be relocated into Azure Data Center.
Copied bit for bit.
They're identical. Oh, I see.
Remember the symmetry picture that I shared earlier in the slide deck? It's identical.
Don't even have to shut them off.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Sorry. Next slide, right, James?
All right, next slide. So that was hardware. The next slide is software. So what's included in AVS? So the top, this kind of requires a master's degree to like figure out what is going on the slide. But the top part, light gray, is essentially all of the things that come with AVS today. It's all the building blocks you would need for a VMware environment. Your vSphere, vCenter, HCX, vSAN, NSX, right? Important to note that with NSX, right, we get this question a lot, like, well, geez, we haven't really dabbled in NSX yet. We haven't really messed around with, microsegmentation. That's fine. You don't have to integrate and utilize NSX if you're not using it today on-prem. It's just there as a building block to, a VMware infrastructure. Underneath the darker gray is essentially what's in private preview today. Because of our agreement with Broadcom, we've essentially purchased the whole VCF stack, right? That's what, their flagship product. So these are services that'll, again, no additional cost. It comes with AVS, but we're slowly updating our regions to make sure they have the full stack. And now you're going to get your VCF operations, automation, operations for logs, and operations for network, right? So if you're an old VMware head, this used to be, I'm going to draw a blank. ARIA operations. Right, so if ARIA operations sounds familiar, that's essentially what they rebranded to VCF operations. You got all the little pieces that come with it. Now, add-ons, in case you want to add them on later, there's again, a couple different ways that you can add services on. For distributed firewall and gateway firewall, those will actually be added through your Azure portal, right? So you could go in and add those if you'd like. For things like IDS, IPS, advanced load balancing, and DR, right? So live site recovery is what used to be called Site Recovery Manager, or SRM from VMware before, right? Their automated DR runbook. You can purchase those through VMware, right? So that would be the one piece you'd have to go back to Broadcom for and say, hey, we'd like to add these services, and you can certainly do that. Tanzu is not currently included. I think right before I left Broadcom, there was a conversation going on internally on whether or not they're going to continue to support Tanzu or not. I'm not sure what their roadmap looks like for that, but suffice to say, we have our own Azure Kubernetes service, right? So if you want to do containers, I would highly recommend doing it in AKS, which again sits in the same region as your VMware environment, right? So you can build out your containers in Azure Kubernetes, have it connected to your AVS environment here. It's going to be sub 2 milliseconds, right? So it's going to be very, very fast. I shouldn't see any latency or issues right there. But regardless, this is the stack. We upgraded to 8.0, right? So it's going to be the latest version of VCF. And that's that. So that's what comes included with AVS. And again, important to know, you don't have to purchase this through Broadcom, right? This comes included. It's baked in the cost of AVS. So once you procure this from us, you can simply walk away from that Broadcom contract, right? Assuming you migrate your entire estate out and into AVS, Microsoft essentially becomes your VMware sell-through at that point. Next slide. And then regions, we're in 34 regions today for AVS, right, out of 60 plus overall. We're continuing to add, so you can see there in the light purple, we added 5 in the last year. That's pretty common, right? We add a couple more just about every year, new data centers across the world, but we're in a lot of the major ones that most of our customers ask for, right? I've rarely run into a customer that's asked me for a region that we have not been able to support. It was great for a long time. India was the one, right? When are you going to come to India? So good news. In the last year, we added India Central. So now we've got a data center there that runs AVS. And I think, one more slide. So we kind of went over some of this in a few other slides. I don't want to belabor the point, right? There's some minimums, there's some maximums for clusters. The minimum is by far the most important, right? You need at least 3 nodes. It's very rare that we run into customers that have more than 96 nodes in a single private cloud. Those are pretty massive environments. Other than that, just some of your standard networking bits and bytes you can see here on the slide. And then at the very bottom, it says vSAN capacity limits, right? So 75% of the storage on those nodes that you saw earlier is usable. The other is, available for its overhead, right? So we kind of reserve that off to the side. And I think that wraps up my portion of the speech. Any questions on what we just went over?
I actually have a question. So I'm in telecom sales. I have one hospital client who has VMware on-prem. They got hit by Broadcom's acquisition and recontracting of services. So their billing went from about $7,000 to $21,000.
Yep.
Sure. So they came to me and asked me for some advice and some options. And I brought in some integrators and some consultants into the conversation. And that's why I find this really timely, because this is really fascinating and it really applies to the situation I'm in. James, when you said that it's baked into AVS, that VMware is baked into AVS, does that mean that it would be inherently cheaper than what they're paying today as far as the license on a on-prem device?
We're on a recorded line, but I can tell you unequivocally, you will not find a lower cost for your VMware licensing than through AVS.
Great. Wow. Okay.
You'd be shocked to see the number.
We're gonna bring up the Azure calculator and show them. Good. No.
I mean,
Fine.
we could, but keep in mind the AVS costs is literally a data center fully included, right? So it's facilities, it's utility costs, it's hardware, storage, top of rack, the networking, and VMware licensing all baked into the cost. We will have an option on our pricing calculator soon that's a bring your own licensing option. Right, so it's for customers who have already purchased VCF through Broadcom and simply want to bring that over. So if you just do the math, we could say, okay, what is our AVS cost versus our bring your own licensing cost? What's the difference? That's my VMware portion. It's a fraction of what you'd be able to get it from VMware.
Wow. Okay. And in this particular case, the CFO is also very keen on moving from on-prem and into the cloud. So this solution set may actually be
It's the way to go.
the way to go. Yeah.
Yeah.
One quick question, and this may be just my I'm still kind of learning this side of the fence, but Microsoft also has Hyper-V, right? Which is also a hypervisor. What's the difference between Hyper-V versus VMware? Why don't they just go straight to Hyper-V then?
Because you'd still have to refactor and rewrite those applications and reconfigure them and learn a whole new, management console and management plane, right? It's just a whole new, it's like same thing as like Nutanix, right? And that's what a lot of customers are going through on-prem right now is like, okay, what are our options to get away from Broadcom? We can try to move into the cloud. We can switch hypervisors. And the other hypervisors, the major ones that are in play, I mean, sure, you can do, an open source option, but good luck with that. Or you can do a Nutanix or Azure Stack, right? Our Hyper-V option on-prem. And it still requires, again, your teams to change out your entire hypervisor, relearn that hypervisor, because they're all a little bit different on how they manage things. And then kind of get used to that new bicycle, if you will, right? Trying to ride the bike and find where all the widgets and the gadgets and the brakes are to make sure your environment's running. So when I have this conversation with my customers, I'm like, look, I work for Microsoft, so clearly I'll be biased. I'd love you to be a Microsoft customer, whether that's, stay on-prem and go to Azure Stack or, bring it over to the cloud. But if you have a customer in this case, I typically try to run through what are you trying to accomplish over the next 3 to 5 years? Are there any pushes to go to the cloud for whatever reason, right? Whether it's a CapEx versus OpEx conversation, maybe the CFO wants to get away from hardware and depreciating assets and wants to go towards an OpEx model. Maybe it's a scalability, conversation, right? A lot of my customers, especially when I covered healthcare, post-COVID, right? All the supply chain issues with hardware became a real sticky point for them to say, like, maybe this is the right time to look at the cloud. So whenever a customer then comes to me and says, we would rather go to the cloud, we'd rather not just switch a hypervisor and stay on-prem, it seems like a lot of work for not a lot of, gains or benefits. It's just kind of we're avoiding a Broadcom tax. Then I say, look, AVS is going to be your cleanest, the least risky, and the fastest way of getting out of what you're experiencing right now.
That's great. Thank you.
You can get a
You're welcome.
quote from Microsoft on your migration.
Yeah. There's a tool, Azure Migrate, you can run on the on-premises VMware, and it will look at what your customer has and tell you how many nodes of AVS you'll need and all that kind of stuff.
Is that the same as RV Tools or is that different?
RV Tools is native to VMware. Azure Migrate is a free tool from Microsoft.
Okay.
Yeah. You install it on a VM on the VMware environment and give it the creds to your VMware, and it will then scan your environment and do an analysis, and it'll spit out some reports.
Wow.
Tell you all about Azure Migrate. You just
Azure Migrate.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a free tool. You can download it. Just need to well, actually, it's an OVA in VMware. Yeah, so it's an image.
Thank you.
Sorry, I don't know if you're going to cover that, Kim.
I think we're going to be running out of time.
Okay.
I'm gonna jump directly into the demo.
Go for it.
So what you see in a view of Bastion host, I'm trying to connect to and see what happened here. I think this model bit of a delay.
No live demo ever goes unpunished.
So what you do is you say, picture this.
Is there any way that we can, maybe I can share just my.
Well, just sharing your desktop.
Make sure you do the right sacrifices to the demo gods.
Just share the window if you want. Just share your whole desktop.
You guys see?
You can see this.
Oh, perfect. Any window?
Close the browser window. Yeah, we can see it. It's a little small, we can see it. Yeah, that's fine.
This one for James. A question for James. Sumin asks if there's any Azure certifications for AVS.
I believe there are some modules you can go through, but the real beauty of AVS is that if you know VMware, you know AVS. But the modules, again, I think that there are some, but it's mostly around like how to navigate the Azure portal and like set up your AVS tenant. Right, because there's a couple things you need to go through, like providing a /22 for the networking and some other things that you need to walk through. Make sure you have a subscription, within your Azure tenant, right? So it'll walk through some of those how-tos, but it's pretty simple. Again, I think what I typically say is where AVS really lacks in like the glitz and the glamour of like a cloud native solution, it more than makes up for in simplicity and speed, right? So again, if you're a VMware customer on-prem today, you manage the micro parts of your environment, it's still through your vSphere web client, just like you do today. It really just looks like Microsoft and AVS have essentially become your VMware colo. That's what it looks like in your vSphere web client.
Essentially, what we're looking at, I'm trying to get a jump host on this screen. Let me walk back a little bit to the AVS portal. So essentially, when you deploy, you have to have a minimum, the site of subnet is 22/22. Can y'all hear me, or should I yell a little bit louder? So
Do you want the mic back?
yeah. Got it, yeah. So we're seeing the a minimum slash of 22 as a requirement, minimum requirement to deploy AVS. And for this particular deployment, we do have the minimum C cluster, the 3 of them. And in this case, we do not have a stretch cluster. So the concept of stretch cluster is that you have multiple set of hosts in different zones. So an availability zone consists of multiple data center, that are in a different geographically 300 miles away from each other, that would be far enough to deter or protect you from disaster from happening. So the stress cluster is spanned across those availability zone. And in this case, a stress cluster have a 3 zone normally. The first is your primary cluster. The second set of servers is going to be in a secondary zone where it's replicate data across. Then the third set of cluster are going to be your witness. So in a nutshell, that's what our stretch cluster. So in this case, we don't see one. We only see one set of cluster here. In terms of connectivity wise, and we talked earlier about express route, and this is what it looked like in the portal. Essentially, you will have to use the authorization keys here to provide in the portal to be able to set up your express route. And here's the global reach that we talk about. In this case, we do not have such connection enabled, but these are what it looked like in the portal should you have one. And AVS interconnects another connectivity module that allow connection between private cloud and non-transitive location, right? So, and then in terms of VMware credential, earlier we talked about different tool, vCenter tool, right, to connect to operate, to run your day-to-day VMware operations. These are two of the credentials that I would use to be able to connect through a Bastion host. Where's my Bastion host? Sorry, where's the other tab? Oh, there it is. I just deploy a Bastion host here. Get to it. So I'm going to log in. As you can see, it automatically pop up another browser, right? And in the Bastion host, I have the vSphere credential to prompt me to log in, and these are the credential I would be leveraging to connect to it. And I'm not going to show you the password. Sorry. Not meant to be shared. There you go. So these are the exact same view you would have on-prem. Not anything different. We see earlier we saw 3 hosts. So there they are, the ESX hosts right there. Right? And these are the machine that are the resource that are running on those 3 host cluster. And you have the ability to grant permissions, revoke, add people. Here's are your VMs. And these are your resource pool. Well, don't have anything in here. You can.
VMs, I missed that. Was there?
Yeah, yes, we do.
That's some.
Yes. So these are
No things.
a few little things. So there are 3 app server right there, and there is a EVM. I don't know what the EVM for. But these are the app server. And this particular server is for that migrations capabilities tool that we talk about. You wanted to use this ACX service to do a large scale migrations. And then for the NSX, which is another virtualization of network and security, I can show you how to get in there. Same credential. Whoopsie, where is it at? There you go. So to get to there, I'll just cut and paste the URL, web URL client here, right? It's not anything fancy. So without this Bastion host, you cannot get to it. You can probably set up a VPN tunnel to Azure and associate that tunnel. Okay, why is it not working?
Copy the password. You copied the username again.
Whoopsie. Thank you. That's username. Here's my password. There we go. Thank you. So in here, I mean, clearly you see the networking capability. I'm not going to go into the details of this, but there are security capability as well as the ability to set policy, right? In terms of security, your perimeter policy, northwest, east, and south. And you can do micro segmentation of your VM. So for instance, you want to microsegment and inspect traffic that from VM to VM flow. So this is where you would go in and segment those out. And let me drill in a little bit more on here. As you can see here, there are some default set up already. But there are 2 of the traffic that was set up, and I can show you what it looked like in the portal here. we will be seeing two segmentation. One is from on-prem to Azure, AVS Azure. And the second one is for the migrations tool, the migration agent uplink. And what that look in here is, you can see that HCX and then AVS to Azure. And these are the private default segmentation when it came with the setup. And then you have the ability to VPN, set up VPN, NAT it the traffic. Egress out of the internet, you want to NAT it. And then a lot of load balancing capabilities here as well. You need to set it up. Let's see, what's inventory look like? There you go. Essentially, we have 5 different group, 9 virtual machines. There are 64 context policy. What else? We have any container? Nope. No physical server found. Not sure what that means. And this is where troubleshooting NSX is a complex task. It certainly beat me. But this is where I would go in here to see the insight and troubleshoot nuggets at a time. All right, so in a nutshell, a brief overview of NSX manager, and then these are the vCenter client. Anything else in here you guys want to see? This is the agent, the migration tool. This has not been configured. I enable it, but I have not fully set it up. So you're going to see an empty shell. But there is an agent and a VM machine spun up for this particular service. So essentially, when you want to replicate live replication for minimal downtime, the site pair concept is very critical, and you can create the mesh, ACX mesh, to be able to establish connectivity replication bit by bit to and from source and destination. In this case, I do not have one. This is where I would create a new site pair should I have my own data center and want to set it up. And for the migration, if I have sorry, I couldn't do much here, but pretend that I have it set up and it's completely synced. You will see a green entry here, and you would essentially hit the migrate button. In the portal, is there anything else that's important here? So essentially, we talked about Azure Arc earlier, right? So to be able to see the inventory, we would need Arc enable. In this case, we do not have that. So it's just a very boring boule here. But AVS is also very well integrated into Azure monitors. And as you can see here, once you enable diagnostic setting, all of these metrics is actually going to be sending to a log analytic workspace, and you can mine the data, set up real-time intelligence should you are anal about how am my AVS environment doing. This is where I would look into setting up. And you can see the AVS is just like any other Azure services, familiarity in terms of the IAM, right? You grant access to AVS through RBAC. And within the machine itself or the VMware operations, there's another security control through network security group that you can create through here, through the vSphere client. So let me be clear that the IAM here is going to be at an Azure RBAC control level. Who is accessing my vSphere VMware resources in Azure, right?
Host level?
At the host level, yes, that's correct. So who can delete, add, remove my networking, and segment my networking? Some of the vSphere or vCenter vMotion can be done here, but not entirely. Want to be clear that this is our Azure RBAC control. And in terms of identity, if you have an on-prem data center, you will be needing the domain ADDS, the Azure Directory Domain Services enable ADDS. And what that meant is you're going to be using ADAP, and there's a difference between LDAPs, LADP, and then LADPS. The difference between those is the second one with an S, LDAPs. It's encrypted. So if you use LDAP without an S, you will see your password in plain text. Simple as that. So in terms of identity and access control, highly recommend that you be using Entra ID to connect to Azure, leveraging your Active Directory in Azure. Those are the two components that I wanted to bring to your attention. But that doesn't make any difference. I mean, if you know, like James was saying, if you know VMware, you know AVS. The only thing new is the Azure feel and knowledge around VNet, access control, security, set up express route, and that's it.
How would you add nodes here?
I'm sorry.
How would you add nodes from here?
That's a great question. Hang on. I think
Manage. I've locked up a bit.
there you go. Cluster. There you go. Thanks. Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know why it's taking this long, but you would add a cluster and it doesn't take that long. I think about 15 minutes, you can have another node add to this pool. But the initial deployment take about 4.5 to 5 hours.
Maybe 36.
36, yeah. And in terms of storage, I mean, you have a wide variety of storage here. You have Elastic which is an Azure file flavor of Azure storage. You can also have NetApps, pure storage as well. And of course, vSense is come of proprietary of VMware, right? So these are different flavor of storage.
So it comes with vSAN.
It come with vSAN, that's
You
correct.
can add those others as you need to.
That's correct. As your company grows, you will add on as like an extensions of the vSAN.
The vSAN size is determined by the nodes you pick and how many, right?
That's correct. Thank you, Adam. The size, the SKU that you pick when you you deploy your cluster. It's just like a VM, right? It's
You mix node sizes, like you've got AV36Ps there. Can you pick something else in the same region for another cluster, you know?
mix.
Not in the same cluster. So the one exception is with those AV64 Gen 1s that require that mixed seed cluster. Apart from that, no, you cannot mix and match within the same cluster, but you can have multiple different clusters, and then obviously you can, stitch those together into your management plane and your vSphere web client.
Each cluster has to be 3 nodes of whatever you pick, but you're stuck with whatever you pick.
Yeah, you can trade those in later if for some reason you want to. So very common when our original node was the AV36. When we were sunsetting that and we were looking at updating it to the AV36P, which had 30% extra storage and 50% extra RAM, we worked with our customers just to essentially exchange those nodes out and then, migrate the environment to the newer nodes.
Right.
All right. So last thing I want to cover is the run command. There's a variety of command that can be run to your vSphere or your AVS environment for your cloud foundations. And you can run through the portal. You don't have to go through the vCenter to do that. Tons of them. I want to call this out here. Anything else I'm missing, James? I think we're coming up on time at 7:25. So there's a lot more slide I want to cover. However, I wanted to save that for a different time and day. But for the deployment, Ray, here is your deployment step. And then these are some of the component requirements when you do that. And the networking pieces of it, we can talk forever and ever. Wanted to quickly go over that. This is the initial deployment. This is what your architecture would look like, right? So you get your dedicated MC or Microsoft Meet Me location and an Azure Express route. And this is a Gen 1 we're talking about. And that's what it looked like. So as you go on, and you're starting to add more, a second express route. And as you connect to Azure VNet, you have your gateway, you need to enable your global reach. Remember, no transitive routing whatsoever, right? So that's one of the key components. And then your on-prem connectivity to Azure, you have a different express route. So as you can see here, Gen 1, you have 2 different express routes. We breeze through this. So what are you looking at is the standard topology of network for VMware Solution. So we talk about the storage. Please tell me if I'm rushing, but we did see that in the portal that you have many different options to add to internet apps. If all possible, I would highly recommend NetApps, the best storage solution out there in terms of performance. The cost-wise, you need to pick and choose the right tier to fit your need. But in terms of vSAN, there is the loop and compressions enable that's inclusive with the vSAN by default. I think this is yours, right, James? You wanted to talk about it a little bit? So that's in a nutshell of VMware. I mean, AVS. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to see? Any different?
Hey, Kim,
Yes, sir.
how do you manage snapshots?
Big question. In terms of VMware snapshot, what are your you can schedule it and you can
How do you revert to a previous snapshot? You have schedules.
why do you want to do that?
The way we use the VMware is you would develop some application with like some special configuration. If something goes wrong or you want to revert to something earlier snapshots, you would go back and revert to a snapshot.
To be frank, I haven't done that in a very long time, but I think I understand where you're coming from. I think there should be a different version of the VM you can revert it to, but let me double check. I'll get back with you. I'll send you an article on that.
So what you're using here is just for deploying, like you would have an image and then you would deploy it in a cluster. You would have like several nodes.
Actually, I mean, it depends, right? So if you have an existing VM that you migrated, you probably have scheduled backups or vault that you back it up to, right? And you want to restore it or revert back to the previous point in time. It's just like a image management. But for the newer VM, you probably have templates that you deploy from or clone from existing one. If you have a golden image, I would highly leverage that to deploy newer image because you don't want to deploy old image and continue to patch them. So your golden image should be up to date, deploy so that it's brand new as good as new. Right. I'll get you the snapshot article. I honestly, I haven't done one in a very long time. Any other questions?
Ray's packed up. He's packed up his bag. He's closed it
Ray
down.
have given some clues.
That means we're done here.
Yeah, that means we're
Ray's,
done.
these boys, we're out of here. So who learned something? I learned something. Yeah, another evening not wasted. Thanks very much to represent.
Thank you, Kim and James.
There's James on the
Thank you,
night.
James.
It's my pleasure. Everyone have a good night.